My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
I was never really a runner. The way I see running is a gift, especially when you have stage 4 cancer. I'm Anne. I'm running the Boston Marathon, presented by Bank of America. I run for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to give people like me a chance to thrive in life, even with cancer.
Join Bank of America in helping Anne's cause. Give if you can at BofA.com/supportAnne. What would you like the power to do? References to charitable organizations is not an endorsement by Bank of America Corporation. Copyright 2025.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nerding Out on Neurodiversity, the podcast for all things neurodivergence. I'm Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist and professional speaker, and I'm happy to be your host through the wild trails of the neurodivergent world.
And I'm Jake Noonan, educational coach and humanities teacher, your co-host and producer, and I'm thrilled to help share the stories and the experiences of wonderful people in the world of neurodiversity.
We're really excited for today's guest, which we are going to say a lot because we're always really excited about every guest we get. So let's get into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fabulous, spectacular, exciting episode of Nerding Out on Neurodiversity. I am your host, Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist, professional speaker, published author, Jake, and we're going to keep working on that. And with me, as always, is my co-producer and very good friend, Mr. Jake Noonan. Say hi, Jake.
Hi, everybody. Just going to echo that again, that Dr. Matt is a published author, and we're still working on crushing that imposter syndrome a little bit for both of us, so it's perfectly fine.
Steps by steps.
It's a whole process. It's a thing.
Real time. I'm going to introduce our guest today because she is not only a colleague, she is a dear friend and super internet famous, which we have spent our pre-show discussing. Please welcome to the podcast, Dr. Emily King. Round of applause. Yay. She's here with us. Yay.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me.
So I want to learn with Dr. Emily. That's what I want to do. So tell us about your journey. Tell us how you got here. Let us love on you a little bit because you're just awesome.
Well, thank you so much for that. I have imposter syndrome about people actually seeing me out on the internet and then realizing like who's been learning from me. That's great, though. This is what I want. So I started my career as a school psychologist, but prior to that, I had always loved education. I wanted to be a teacher until I discovered psychology and then discovered school psychology. So I have always loved the psychology of learning. And as I got into my work as a school psychologist, I became really into thinking about what impacts learning in terms of our dysregulation, our behavior, our systems, our relationships, all the things that make learning hard beyond just what we used to think about generations ago, which was just like, intelligence and learning disabilities. There's so much more that can get in the way of learning. So for the last 15, 20 years, I've been in private practice in North Carolina, able to work beyond schools with children, teachers, parents, providers to help everyone figure out the best way that their neurodivergent kid learns. Along that journey in parallel, I've become a parent. I now have an 11-year-old and a 17-year-old. So I have parented this from a perspective of all the age ranges at this point. And both my kids have neurodivergent presentations in their own way. And I've been that collaborator, that parent at the IEP table, the 504 table, but also have helped clients with that. So I come at it from what I like to say is all sides of the table.
I cannot believe your oldest is 17.
I know.
That is like, what? Oh my gosh. I mean, are you guys having the college conversation?
We're not yet, because he's got some individual differences that make college hard for him. And I think it's good for us all to talk about the realities of not all of our kids go to a 4-year school. And I will say the way this feels to me now as having a 16, 17-year-old, first of all, last year it was everyone asking me if he was driving because he also has epilepsy and he has attention struggles. He's not driving. It reminds me of when kids are like 4 and 5 and everyone asks, oh, where are they going to kindergarten? Or, oh, are they, this, that, or the other? And you may have your child in, a developmental preschool, or you may be deciding to do an extra year of preschool because your child is not ready. And it feels much more vulnerable back when your child is preschool age. At this point, not my first rodeo. I'm totally cool. My kid is totally cool being like, yeah, I'm not ready to drive. Or I'm not ready for a 4-year school. No, but we are, talking about graduating, and we are talking about what he loves to do and what he feels like he wants to work on with independence. And all of those things are equally as important as these general questions we ask everybody, which is small talk, right? And we all do it. Yeah. Whenever that comes up, I love to just share a little bit more about the questions that we are having. And also when people ask him directly, I have to coach him on what to say, right?
Asking that question, I thought to myself, this is going to be a great nugget either way.
Yeah.
Because either you guys decide to do the college journey, and what is that going to look like for him? You and I have talked about on other podcasts and other platforms, some of the stuff he's gone through. But I also was like, if that's not the journey, then not for nothing, but a leader in our field, you are affirming neurodivergence through talking about your kiddo. Not only the driving thing, right? But also we're not sure what college looks like, if college is even ever going to be a thing. And I think that it's so easy to just get swept up in the current of the monoculture. You finish high school and go to college, right? When people who have platforms like us say, hey, that's not necessarily my kid's journey, I think it normalizes it for a lot of other people. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. And I think both my kids will be different. I think I'll be having a different conversation about my younger child. And I think that we're probably the first generation of parents where the pendulum's swinging back to what I like to call dynamic decisions. It was 100 years ago, we were working on access of education for all and for everyone to have equality. And then we worked on, okay, now we've got either general education or special education. And now it's okay, but not everyone cleanly fits into those molds. And so if we think about it in a dynamic way of making general education work with 504s or making special education work. And then beyond that is also the world I'm living in too, with some of my clients and with my kid, is thinking about how our high schools, just the structure of high school and how they do not at all mimic real world or the workplace. And we have some great programs locally to us in North Carolina where they're doing a lot of great support with companies for making them more neuroaffirming and helping managers and HR departments understand the talent in so many neurodivergent people. But we have to interview them in a different way and let them show their skills in a different way. So as your kids grow up, this, you love working with a range of kids, but then when you live it with certain age ranges, you're oh, this is just on my mind all the time because of him and because of the age of some of my clients. So it has to be a part of our discussion because the world does not really parallel what we get kids used to in school.
Absolutely. And I didn't think that the conversation would go this particular way, but if you'd indulge me.
Sure.
When things like that are on your mind all the time as a parent, it feels like it's a never-ending war, like you are trying to ice skate uphill. And I think a lot of parents get into this headspace of, I'm not allowed to ask for help. I'm not allowed to rest. I'm not allowed to take a minute off from this because this is my kid and I have to fight for my child. Now, when you and I wear our therapy hats for this, at the end of the hour, you put that compartment back in the compartment and we go see our next person. So what is the self-care ritual routine for you when you're doing this journey for your own kid? And how does that differ from you doing this with your professional Dr. Emily hat on?
Well, I think I'll answer professionally first because we have built-in boundaries through ethics and through understanding compassion fatigue and things that we absolutely follow just as default. Like, we're not going to continue working with someone when we feel like it's outside of our wheelhouse. We're not going to, push through continuing to work with someone when we feel like we can't meet their needs. There are things ethically that we have boundaries on that ultimately protect our capacity to continue helping, that make our work more sustainable. The personal side of that is, and I will say this really to all parents, I always say parenting a kid that's neurodivergent is just like regular parenting on steroids. It's just like everything is more. Everything is just like more intense, more of it, more persistent, more random, more like you didn't see this coming, like it's just more. And so you have to therefore have more radical boundaries, because the boundaries that naturally come with a child becoming more independent, or being able to do their homework on their own, or being able to drive themselves somewhere, or being able to get a job before they're 25, whatever the thing is of the milestone in our mind that provides some relief on, okay, my kid is growing up, they're moving on through the world. That helps parents, see progress, and it helps parents know, if we have any middle-aged friends, which I'm sure that we do, you have this moment where you're like, okay, my kids are getting a little bit more independent. I think I have time to do something like fun, like a hobby or something. And so sometimes that doesn't happen naturally, or a lot of times that doesn't happen naturally for parents raising neurodivergent kids, because the time frame of independence for your children is not predictable. You have to work for it, and you have to carve out your time, which therefore leads to your own restoration, basically. So I will say you may have to actively do that. What I do, and it's taken many years, still work in progress, because I am a recovering perfectionist. We were discussing this before we got on as well. This is of course before I had kids, as a child, I used my anxiety my perfectionism, my anxiety, my achievement. I went to school for a real long time, like straight through, because I was just really good at it. And that's just what I did. I got lots of great feedback on like, oh, you're really good at this.
Gold stars forever.
So I just kept going. And then I got a PhD in the psychology of school. I mean, why not? Right? Like, it's just good for me. So once I kind of came out the other side of that, which truly wasn't until my 30s, because I was on this hamster wheel of school and work and had kids and work and balancing and all of that, there was so much that wasn't sustainable. And that was intertwined with my kids' ages and how I needed to be present for them. And I'll say this is all in the context of I also have an incredibly supportive partner who has a full-time salaried job with benefits. So I am able to have my private practice schedule flexibility that I do, because that is the reality of my family. But to answer specifically on self-care, I attend therapy weekly. I sing in the folk band at my church, and music has always been a huge part of my life. And I took a break from it for a long time, like 15 years, and didn't realize how much joy I was missing out on that. And I only like a certain amount of socialization. I am an introvert, and people are surprised to hear this sometimes because I talk so much, but I get worn out. I like show up and I talk and I speak and all the things, and then I get worn out. So I've got like my pockets of my trusted friends, and they're so important to me. So when I think about like our regulation and what we need to stay regulated, for me, it's just the right amount of social engagement. And then I go back into my hole and start reading books again. And then it is, for me, it's music. And I try to move as much as I can, but I'm not, it's not my favorite thing to do. I'm not one of these people that like loves to work out, but I do have to make it a priority. And then it is having that space every week where I get out of my head and someone else gives me completely objective feedback on, what is getting in my way. So that's what I do for self-care.
I mean, Jake, when she said folk band, I thought you were going to leap out of your chair.
Oh, do we need to talk about music?
I mean, a little bit probably, because I play drums in 3 different bands, and I've been doing drums for like, I was like 11 when I started, did marching band and everything. But there's a folk band in Vermont, like where I live right now, that I've been slowly keeping up with, and I'm going to reach out to them soon about trying to play drums for them as well.
Our bands.
Do it. Drums are really regulated. Yeah. So I'm really blessed because we have a really great, it's like a folk, it's like the Avett brothers went to church is what it sounds like. And so it's like a very kind of Appalachia sound. And I love it. And it's, acoustic-y and singer-songwritery, and it's just my jam totally. And I love these people. So, the people and the music and the rhythm and the consistency of it showing up for something joyful every week has been life-changing for me. I started doing that about 2 years ago when I had to get to the point where homework in my home was not a man-on-man job. My husband and I have been doing man-on-man homework defense for a long time. And actually it was my younger one that, started to get more independent with his homework. I was able to just not be there for 2 hours on an evening, which was great. But I mean, it's things like that you have to just figure out how to make it happen if you can. And it may not be that you can do it yet, but it's coming.
Absolutely. There's a question that I wrote down, if you're open to sharing, obviously, but what was the journey like for you and your older kid? And what were some of the high points, the joys that you found, and then some of like the low points and the struggles that you found, and how you kind of like adapted, not just you, but also your son, your whole family, your other child, like everybody?
Mm-hmm. Well, my kids are 6 years apart for reasons that parenting was hard for the first 6 years. And so anyone who has a big spread of kids and has made an intentional decision to add to their family knows what I'm talking about. I think that, first of all, because my kids are far apart, my parenting competence totally different between the two of them. However, they're so different that I, sort of felt like I had mastered the first one. And then I'm like, oh my God, you're totally different. You need totally different stuff than this first one. Of course, if I could describe my kids, my older one, I would label as the safety patrol. And my younger one, I would label as the cruise director. And so when the two of those personalities are in the same home, you just have to add humor. So what I would say about my journey is I learned very early on, because it was just going to become unsustainable, is that we have to take all of this parenting, especially with school and learning, one school year at a time. I hear so much from families that are terrified when they have an aggressive young child. That same child is going to be aggressive when they're 15 and 16 and they're big. And now what do we do? Well, that child is 4. So let's pause on that, because I know, and I'm sure, Dr. Matt, you have too, seen so much regulation progress with maturity and just with time and brain development, and of course, with therapies. But there are just some circumstances where time is the best treatment plan. And we just have to help families trust that and believe that and surround themselves with the best people, and then just help moving forward. So one step at a time has always been, for my older son, what we have tried to do, because every single school year has been very different. I would say some of the high points are figuring out his interests and just radically leaning into those. When he was young, he was y'all remember Angry Birds, incredibly into Angry Birds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I'll never forget, this is an example of something I did. He, had lots of sensory sensitivities to the beach. And also, it doesn't snow very much anymore, but when it snowed, he wouldn't go out and play in the snow. And we had all of these, they used to make actual like blocks and towers of Angry Birds. I have a whole set of like figures of Angry Birds. They're in my therapy playroom now. And I don't even think they make them anymore. But of course, we had all of them because he was so into it. And so I taught this child how to play in the snow and play in the sand by building sandcastle, snowcastle, like figures that the birds would sit on, and then we would slingshot them down, just like the game. Of course, we were out there for like 10 minutes tops, right? But it was that slow stretching of his regulation within a challenging environment, but with the safety of the play and the safety of the interest. And so learning how to stretch him in that way by using his interests was, of course, it's a shift for all of us because, I talk to parents all the time and they're like, I can't believe I am going to a convention for, dogs this weekend or whatever it is, that could be anything. But you do it when it's your kid's thing and like whatever lights your kid up, follow it, like follow the breadcrumbs to expand that and make that joy just bigger and bigger because there's so much that they're not into that they have to face every day. Some of the hard things were just figuring out his regulation and his communication with when he felt dysregulated early on and working on his insight with that. We've had an awesome team around us, not only in therapeutic team, but also with school. This is why I'm such an advocate for policy and, public school change and support because my kid is in 11th grade and I don't think he would get the same support right now that he got when he was in kindergarten and first grade. Things are changing about funding. Things are changing post-COVID about teacher burnout and how many educators we need to help kids feel safe at school. I could talk for days about that, but I think that has been one of the biggest challenges, but something I'm really grateful for because I poured a lot of time into relationships at school and letting him know that, everyone was on his team. And then at some point, the transition of helping him advocate, which is funny because both my kids are like, can you just email the principal about this? Because my older kid, I was on a email text basis with the principal at one point. And so it was somewhat reality. But for my younger kid, I'm like, no, you need to talk to your teacher. So it's just thinking about what is your kid capable of. You step in when they're not capable of it yet, and you pull back when you start to see their independence emerge. I talk all the time to parents about this. That balance is, the ultimate goal, I think, for all of us in parenting, but especially in neurodivergent parenting, because every single skill is in a different place on that trajectory of development.
You see why I like her so much, right? I mean,
yeah, just a little bit at least.
And it's funny, let's zoom into that one thing, right? Because the role of the parent in education is something that gets a lot of attention and it's a controversial thing, right?
Sure.
You and I, I'm sure, have dealt with many a helicopter parent.
Mm-hmm.
Jake, whenever I say helicopter parent, I always think of one particular mom that you and I both know.
I've had some horror stories of many, many parents, but also some really good ones at the same time.
And parents who, once you tell them that there's a framework to step back, they are willing to step back. I think a lot of parents, especially the parents of neurodivergent kids, they become not just warriors for their kids, but they almost become like, my kid doesn't go anywhere without me.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, just to echo what you said, you step back as your kid develops independence. The idea is that they should need us, if not less than certainly in different ways about their own journeys. So what's it like for you advocating for your kiddos, not just as a mom, but as a doctor, as a psychological professional? I mean, do you feel like that changes the dynamic, or do you feel like that they just treat you like any other parent in the pickup line?
Yeah, so it has been different at different stages. Some teachers know what I do for a living and some don't actually, and I don't tell them. And so I think that occasionally it has become obvious based on the vocabulary that I use. It has been difficult to find providers to evaluate my kids because I know everyone. So I go to the town over to get my kids evaluated. But when I'm working with teachers, I've taken two different approaches, really because of my kids being different. So when my oldest was in elementary, I was all in. My kid was aggressive at school and was really struggling to regulate and had full support that they could give him. But this is just from my perspective. I needed and I wanted that staff to know how hard I was trying. So I was so involved in the PTA and volunteering in his classroom and going on every field trip. At that age, he would not have been able to access the field trip without me. But also, let me give you this example. In elementary school, he needed me there to be able to access the field trip. Middle school was basically COVID. At this point in high school, they're not doing field trips, but my son is loving and really involved in the youth group at our church. Well, I always chaperone the trips, but I was so excited, y'all, when he did not want me to interact with him the whole time. He wanted me to be on the trip. He did not want me to sit with him on the bus. He did not want me to sit with him at meals. And I'm like, yes, it's happening, And so I think that moment, some parents, that makes them sad. And I get that, and that is valid. But if that makes you sad, we've really got to think about, why are you feeling sad and not joyful for your child's independence? We've just really got to dig into that. And that's the piece where many parents need therapy of their own so they don't get in their kids' way. And I think at any stage of development, this can happen. And for many reasons, parents being too, like you were saying, like going places with their kid, or like too, it's really like enmeshed when they're with their kid. Often, this is a generalization, but it often has more to do with the parent's level of anxiety than the child's need for support. So what I always challenge parents to think about is listen to your child's teacher when they say to you, your child can put their shoes on. They're doing it every day. Your child is remembering that water bottle in class, or your child is doing this. I tell teachers that. I say, please share with parents, like, good news. I saw your kid do this today. This skill is emerging. Like, what does this look like at home? Because when it's structured at school, they can remember, or they can do it with this visual, or I figured out a strategy that works. So we've got to keep working together so that we stop getting offended about the territory of like, don't tell me how to parent, don't tell me how to teach. Like, yes, there is some of that we all get a little triggered by, but this is because of the inner work I think I've done, and professionally, I can zoom out sometimes and professionally think about it versus like taking offense. But I hear this all the time from parents. Why does my kid do fine at school and then they're a hot mess at home? Well, it's not because you're a quote unquote bad parent. It's because they left it all in the field. Their regulation system is spent. School is just by nature more structured. So if they're going to respond to predictability and structure better, they're going to do better at school. So there are lots of reasons that happens, and none of them are because you're not doing it well enough, So we can all learn lessons from each other. And I think when we have something that goes well, and this is what I always lean into as a parent, for my kids, usually, well, it's the opposite. My older one would do things developmentally first at home, and then we would have to generalize it to school because he felt safer at home. My youngest, cruise director, ADHD cruise director.
Talking about me, Emily. I'm right.
Is great at school, and then gets around a group of friends or gets around us real comfortable on the weekends, and is all of a sudden saying and doing things that he would never do in front of his teacher. So those dynamics are real, and it's not because anybody's doing it better or worse. It usually has to do with the attachment of the relationships and the setting and the structure of the setting. Sometimes it has to do with the time of day and if they're tired and if they're constipated and whatever else is happening with their body, right? And we need to dig into that too. But if there's one thing I could say to parents and teachers, it's try so hard not to take things personally so that we can get to the bottom of, okay, they're doing this skill here and they're not doing it here. Let's figure out what's working so we can get that skill going in both settings. And I think that's what my goal always in working with schools. And some teachers will, as an aside, they'll be like, I know that you're like Dr. Emily, and I know that you like do this work on the side. And I mean, so far, like, it's been fine. And I haven't like leaned into it and been like, because I never feel like I know more. I feel like I maybe on paper have more strategies than the average parent, But if I get a call from school that my kid has been in the principal's office because he threw a chess piece at someone, I have the same nervous system response to any other parent. There is no knowledge that is going to regulate that in my body. I am like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. How can we figure this out?
I have a really, really interesting question for you, at least I think.
Yeah.
Because it's like a direct experience I had.
Oh, yeah.
So I was teaching at a school and I'm Jewish, like growing up, all learning about Judaism and everything. And I was teaching World War II literature and history. And a parent called me and was very upset that we were going into the Holocaust and was like adamant about not wanting anything to do with the Holocaust with their child. And I was like, I don't know what you want me to do with this, because you're telling a Jewish teacher not to teach the Holocaust right now. Like, what would you, in a sense, say to parents and teachers in those kind of situations when it's less of like a strategy aspect and it's more of like a sociocultural kind of like existential aspect to it?
Yeah, I think this is happening with critical race theory, right? And when we were growing up, it was happening with sex ed and reproductive health, right? So there's always been something. I even got my kids in 5th grade. I got like a 1-sheeter home the other day that was like, we're going to be talking about reproductive health in science class. And on one hand, I'm like, why do they even have to inform me? Like, I don't, please tell them all the things because I may have missed something. Though all of that still exists. What all of that is fear about wanting to control what our kids know and understand. So to me, as a teacher, that's I'm going to need you to talk to the administration because this is our curriculum. Like, that's just probably what that answer needs to be. And then to the parents, I would say, think through if you are asking that question because you are uncomfortable with the knowledge of that being out in the world, or do you truly think your child will struggle understanding that curriculum or struggle with some aspect of it? I'll give you an antithesis of kind of that comment similar. I'm blanking on what it was that my kid was learning, but it was in 5th grade, I believe. And it was something related to history that felt completely overwhelming. It felt violent to him. He got really scared. And I remember talking to the teacher about it. It was the special education teacher at the time that knew him really well. And I just said to her, I was like, oh my God, we haven't even gotten to the Holocaust. Like, how is he even going to learn about that? How is he even going to process this when he can't handle, I don't even remember what it was. It was something that in my mind was not at all as horrific, right? So by the time we got there, it was COVID and he was COVID schooling and I was able to like help him process things. But in that instance, I was concerned about him like falling apart and being sad and inconsolable about the idea of this story, which is different from wanting to control my kid not learning something because I don't want them to know it. That's different.
And this gets back to that idea of dynamic decision-making. My kid can't learn the Holocaust. It's how do we set up the circumstances and staffing and environment my kid can effectively learn about the Holocaust,
right?
And give them those off ramps for if it becomes too much,
right?
I took a class in grad school on suicidology, and it was an elective, and I was like, why is this an elective? Like, this is the thing all mental health professionals deal with eventually, right?
Yeah.
And they said it's literally too much for people. They're like, we keep it on there because it's important, but we let people opt into it rather than having to opt out of it. And you could debate that till you're blue in the face.
Sure.
But it's this idea of taking that as a 4th-year student, having 3.5 years of clinical experience under me. I was like, I can handle this now. I definitely thought I could have handled it as a first year and wouldn't have been able to. So I think these ideas of trusting yourself and trusting your kid's team to co-create these dynamic decision points it may not be the solution, but it's the damn good way to approach these. I think you're giving parents a lot of language that they may not have had.
Well, thank you for bringing up trust, because that is the crux of the issue. And I fully trust my kids' educators. And if they do something that surprises me, I lean into being curious and maybe a little confused, and I ask for more of an explanation. And then if I really truly feel like they're not understanding my kid, then that's when I realize that they need either more support or more training. And that's where my whole inspiration for all my professional development that I do came from, because I do really feel like there are many educators out there that don't even realize what they need to help understand some of the kids that we work with. I also want parents to know that there are people like us who are out there trying to help educators understand more. And at the same time, we have to help, how teachers speak to parents too. It goes both ways. And when I speak with educators, I was speaking at a school earlier this week, and they feel scared to even bring things up because they feel scared that the parents are some parents will accuse them of telling them how to parent or accuse them of saying that, their child is quote unquote broken or something, which they're not. They're just giving strategies. So if we can trust that each party has good intentions and we're all on the team of the child, we have to move forward in that spirit. And a lot of my passion from this comes from when I was a school psychologist. Granted, it was 20 years ago. Some of the most adversarial IEP meetings stick out in my mind, and nothing gets solved. Nothing gets solved for that child. Eventually, the paperwork gets done and we move forward. But in all that we know and we've learned about polyvagal theory and our nervous systems being overwhelmed, we cannot do anything but check boxes on an IEP spreadsheet if we are that ready to fight and argue and negotiate. But the flip side of that is you do have to advocate for your kid, right? So I will work with parents and they know that I am not going to tell them to push school administration on something unless I feel like their child needs it and it's worth it, and we got to figure out what's going on. And so, because I'm very cautious about overwhelming teachers, and I understand the reality of, funding and not enough teachers, period, to give the support that truly clinically we would recommend. There's so many kids that need an aid that don't have an aid. We could solve so many problems if we put all of our money into aids. If we just need more co-regulators in the classroom. If someone just gave me $1 bazillion, that's what I would do. I would be like, co-regulators everywhere, But we don't have that. And so we have to help teachers understand how to be that person for that kid in that moment when they have, 24 other children in the classroom, and help the parents trust that, which is a hard sell. I get it.
Trust is one of those ephemeral things. You need to have it to get it, but how do you get it if you never have it?
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to solve that problem today, but it's the idea of, parents out there, my version of what you're saying is use that meta communication to say, how can we build trust here? Don't think about trust as something you either have or you don't have. Trust is something you build. And even better than build, co-create.
Mm-hmm.
I've rarely met teachers and administrators who aren't on kids' sides.
Right.
There are, right? But most people get into this line of work to help kids.
Right.
They have to follow a different set of marching orders than we do in our roles, but that doesn't mean that they're enemies.
Right.
Okay, so I know that you have a hard stop, and even though I would want to talk to you forever and ever and ever and ever,
we'll just have to do this again.
Part 2, Part 3, Part 4.
We can do a live one from Concord in March, Emily.
Yes, we can. We can.
And you can hide in my hotel room if you don't have your own, if you need your introvert space, right? Because as Captain Extrovert, I will be just fine. I may make you sell books for me. We'll see. So we are going to ask you our final questions. And we end every episode like this. So Emily, if you could have any superhero in the world on speed dial, who would it be and why?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. Wonder Woman? She's got to be a girl. She's got to be. Our kids need to see women, strong women out there.
Boom, done, slam dunk.
Boom. That's it. That's all I got today.
Here for that answer. You had me start thinking of like all these different women superheroes and different characters that I'm like, Oh, there's so many.
Yeah.
My question for you, though, is what's your favorite word and why?
Gosh, y'all should have sent me this ahead of time so I could have thought about it. I mean, I majored in English. There's so many good words. I do have words I don't like.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, can you give me one of each?
Oh, sure. I mean, I have 2 words that I really don't like. One is pamphlet. It's really hard to say. And one is rural, which is also really hard to say.
Really hard to say.
Rural and pamphlet. Really hard to say. Okay. The words that I do like, I really like the word cacophony.
Ooh.
It's a great word. Great word. I feel like there's another, but I'm blanking now. But cacophony is so good.
That's a fantastic word. And also it's funny to me that you mentioned pamphlet and rural because I'm teaching about pamphlets right now in a rural community. So
and now you're going to think about me when you trip over those words because they're really hard to say.
Nonstop the whole time.
There's a great old Dana Carvey comedy bit where he does a list of words that sound like you're drunk, no matter what you say. Rural is one of them. So is judicial. Judicial. It's
like gubernatorial one.
Yeah.
Oh, man. But cacophony, great word. I think that's iambic pentameter, too.
Could be.
Could be.
Could be. If you add in a couple more syllables to make it the 10, but the stressors are there.
Yeah, I'm sure some Shakespeare scholar will jump into the comments and tell us. Dr. Emily, with our brief time left, is there anything you'd like to send our audience home with?
Yeah. Well, if you want to keep learning with me, you can go to learnwithdremily.com. You can find 2 years of a pod stack. Y'all, take that out.
Pod stack.
You can find 2 years of my podcast, and also on my Substack, you can find all my blogs ever written. And also I host monthly online workshops for parents. But I also provide PD for teachers because I just will keep talking about our kids and all this collaboration until we all feel like we trust each other.
Yeah. And I mean, her content is amazing, guys. And I not only read it myself and listen to her podcast, but I use it a lot. So, there's a mutual love fest here, but it is anchored in the fact that Dr. Emily is one of the best professionals out there, and we all would benefit from her brilliance, like we just spent the last hour doing. And she's giving me a face, and it's a lovely face. It's just also stop complimenting me. I hate it. Gold stars.
Thank you.
Well, then for all of us here at Nerding Out on Neurodiversity, thank you for listening to another journey through the wild, wonderful world of neurodiversity and the amazing professionals and people who inhabit it. Once again, I'm Dr. Matt Zakreski. Thank you so much for being here with us. Jake, you want to say goodbye?
Yeah, just thank you for everything, Dr. Emily. It was amazing to meet you. I feel just privileged to even I've gotten to spend this time with both of you, actually. So,
oh, thanks. This was great. Thanks, y'all.
Have a great one, everybody. Take care.
Take care.
Nerding Out on Neurodiversity is brought to you by Dr. Matt Zakreski and the team at the Neurodiversity Collective. To learn more about the Neurodiversity Collective or to be a guest on the podcast, please visit our website at www.theneurodiversitycollective.com/podcast. Audio and production by Jake Noonan. Show your support by subscribing, leaving a 5-star review, and telling your friends about us. Our Instagram and social media handles are at #NoonPodcast, NOON podcast. Your support is appreciated and keeps us going. All discussions presented on this podcast are strictly for informational purposes, awareness, and understanding. The advice presented is not and should not be considered to be therapeutic in nature. If you have any mental health questions, please contact your provider. All rights reserved.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.